Entire Ice Age cities lie hidden beneath the ocean, their stories lost to time. This is not a fantasy but a forgotten truth of human history, where rising seas swallowed whole civilizations along with their advanced technologies and dramatic tales of survival. By the end of this journey, you will see human history in a completely new light. We will uncover how archaeologists are finding these sunken metropolises and ask what forced their people to abandon everything. What forgotten chapter of our own story is waiting to be rediscovered under the waves? 26,000 years ago, our world looked nothing like the map we know today. This was the peak of the last ice age, a time scientists call the last glacial maximum. Enormous ice sheets, miles thick, covered much of North America and Europe. So much of the planet's water was frozen and locked away in these glaciers that global sea levels plummeted. The oceans were over 120 meters lower than they are now. That is like stacking two Niagara Falls on top of each other and then going even deeper. This dramatic drop in water level did not just create narrower beaches. It revealed entire continents hidden beneath the waves. Vast new lands emerged from the sea, creating sprawling, fertile plains where today there is only open ocean. Between what is now Britain and mainland Europe, a huge territory known as Doggerland stretched for thousands of kilometers. It was a landscape of rolling hills, rivers, forests, and marshes. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Shelf connected islands like Java, Borneo, and Sumatra to the Asian mainland, forming a supercontinent rich with life. These were not harsh, frozen frontiers. They were lush, productive environments, some of the most desirable real estate on the planet at the time. Herds of mammoths, giant elk, and other megafauna grazed on these grassy plains, followed by hunters. The rivers were full of fish, and the forests provided abundant resources. It was in these now drowned coastal lowlands, with their mild climates and rich food sources, that human communities could put down roots. They could build more permanent settlements, develop new technologies, and form the complex social bonds that are the foundation of civilization. The stage was truly set for humanity to flourish. And that is precisely where our mystery deepens. What incredible traces of their lives are still down there, preserved in the silent dark? The heart of this lost world, Doggerland, was a vibrant, living landscape. For thousands of years, this vast territory connected the British Peninsula to the European continent. It was not a barren bridge, but a rich and varied homeland for Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. We know this because of the treasures pulled from the deep. Fishing trawlers in the North Sea have, for decades, been dredging up more than just fish. Their nets bring up ancient clues, from the bones of mammoths and giant deer to finely worked flint tools and weapons, all evidence of a human presence. These artifacts are not scattered fragments of a few wanderers. They point to a region that was once densely populated, a true heartland of its age. Modern technology has allowed us to map this sunken world in stunning detail. By scanning the seabed, scientists have charted the ghostly outlines of Doggerland's geography. We can now see the winding paths of its great river systems, the basins of its vast lakes, and the gentle contours of its hills, all preserved beneath layers of silt and sand. These submerged features look exactly like the landscapes on dry land where we know ancient peoples settled and thrived. It is a complete, recognizable world, but one that is utterly silent and drowned. Its end came with terrifying speed. Around 6,150 years before the Common Era, a cataclysm occurred far off the coast of Norway. A massive section of the continental shelf, known as the Storegga Slide, collapsed into the deep sea. This enormous underwater landslide displaced a colossal volume of water, sending a devastating tsunami racing across the ocean. When this wall of water reached the low-lying plains of Doggerland, it was a death sentence. The wave would have scoured the landscape, inundating the forests, marshes, and river valleys in a single, violent event. For the people living there, it was a disaster of unimaginable scale, a sudden and permanent erasure of their entire world from the map. The story of Doggerland is a powerful and sobering lesson. It shows us with brutal clarity how a changing environment, in this case the rapidly rising seas at the end of the Ice Age, could interact with a sudden catastrophe to wipe a whole chapter of human geography from memory. This single event buried a thriving region under the waves, leaving only scattered clues to its existence. It forces us to ask a haunting question. If an entire heartland like Doggerland could vanish so completely, what other lost centers of ancient life might be waiting on the seabed, their stories still untold? The people who thrived in these lost coastal worlds were far more than simple hunters on land. They were master mariners, building boats and navigating vast stretches of open ocean. For a long time, we pictured our Ice Age ancestors as primitive wanderers, trapped by glaciers and limited to continental interiors. That image is now completely shattered by archaeological discoveries. Take the site of Monte Verde in Chile. Evidence there confirms a human presence over 14,000 years ago, a time when a land route from North America would have been blocked by impassable ice sheets. The only logical way these first Americans could have arrived so early is by boat, traveling down the Pacific coastline. Similar evidence from Jewalapuram in India points to sea crossings that connected continents tens of thousands of years ago. These voyages were not accidental drifts. They required sophisticated knowledge of boat building, of reading ocean currents, and of celestial navigation. They imply established routes, repeated journeys, and a deep, intimate understanding of the sea. This maritime lifestyle created a unique foundation for society. Coastal environments offered an incredible abundance of food, from shellfish and fish to marine mammals. Unlike hunting massive herds on land, which required constant movement, these marine resources were predictable and renewable. This stability allowed people to settle down. They could build more permanent villages, invest time in developing new technologies like complex fishing gear, and foster the social and cultural networks that are the bedrock of civilization. Their most important settlements, their central hubs and trading ports, would logically have been built right on the shoreline, at the very edge of their known world. And that is the profound twist in our search for the past. The most advanced and populated centers of the Ice Age world were not built inland. They were constructed on the fertile plains that are now at the bottom of the ocean. Every clue we find on dry land is just a fragment, an echo from the hinterlands. The true heart of their story, their greatest cities and most profound achievements, likely sank beneath the rising tides, holding secrets we are only beginning to conceive. While Doggerland's fate was sealed by a single tsunami, another lost world met its end through a slower, more relentless process. Far to the east, the story of Sundaland reveals a different kind of cataclysm, one that unfolded over generations. This was not a mere land bridge, but a vast subcontinent, a tropical paradise connecting the Asian mainland to what are now the islands of Java, Sumatra, and Borneo. At its peak, Sundaland was a colossal expanse of lush rainforests, river deltas, and volcanic highlands, a true cradle for early human development. It was here, in places like the Liangbua cave on the island of Flores, that we find traces of remarkable ancient peoples, including the enigmatic Homo floresiensis, a small-statured species that thrived in isolation. This was a land of immense biodiversity and almost certainly of profound human diversity as well. Communities developed unique cultures adapted to the rich resources of this tropical world. Their most important settlements would have been along the extensive coastlines where rivers met the sea, creating perfect locations for villages and trading ports. But as the world warmed, the ice melted, and the oceans began their inexorable rise. For the people of Sundaland, this was not a sudden wave but a creeping disaster. Each year, the sea would claim a little more. A familiar fishing ground would turn to salt water, a productive mangrove forest would drown, a village would have to be abandoned and rebuilt further inland. Over centuries, this slow-motion flood fragmented their entire world, slicing the great subcontinent into the scattered islands we see on the map today. This geological upheaval is not just a scientific theory. It is etched into the cultural memory of the region's indigenous peoples. Their oral traditions are filled with powerful stories of great floods and lost lands, echoing this ancient trauma passed down through countless generations. The displacement was massive, forcing populations to flee. This exodus from the drowning coasts of Sundaland may have been the very catalyst that spurred one of humanity's greatest adventures, the epic migrations that populated the far-flung islands of the Pacific. The cultural legacy of those displaced Sundalanders, their seafaring skills and their beliefs, may be woven into the very fabric of Oceania, a puzzle we are only beginning to decipher from the scattered clues left on dry land. The debate over lost civilizations reaches a fever pitch off the coast of Japan. There, submerged beneath the clear waters near Yonaguni Island, lies one of the most controversial underwater discoveries in the world. It is a colossal structure, a massive rock formation that rises from the seabed like a sunken pyramid. Its surfaces are a series of near-perfect right angles, sharp terraces, and stunningly straight steps. Some researchers even point to formations that look eerily like carved faces and animal figures, all weathered by millennia of ocean currents. This is the Yonaguni Monument, and it presents a single, profound question. Are we looking at the ruins of a magnificent prehistoric city, or is it simply a masterpiece of natural geology? Those who believe it is man-made point to its uncanny geometry. The sheer precision of the corners and the long, unbroken straight edges seem to defy random chance. They argue the monument's alignment with the cardinal directions, and the presence of what appear to be drainage channels and ceremonial pools suggest a sophisticated level of urban planning. For them, this is clear evidence of an advanced culture, one that built this monumental structure on dry land when sea levels were over 100 meters lower, only to have it swallowed by the rising waters at the end of the last ice age. Skeptics, however, offer a different explanation. They note that the rock itself is a type of sandstone, a material notoriously prone to fracturing along straight lines and flat plains as it weathers. The powerful tectonic forces in this region, one of the most seismically active on Earth, could have naturally sheared the rock into these seemingly artificial shapes. They argue that while the formation is breathtaking, every feature can be explained by the well-understood processes of natural erosion. The search for a definitive answer continues with every dive. Explorers and scientists meticulously scan the structure, searching for the one piece of evidence that could end the debate. A clear tool mark, a quarrying scar, or a single, undeniable artifact resting within its walls. So far, such a smoking gun has remained elusive. This enduring mystery forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge. If Yonaguni is natural, it is one of the world's most incredible geological coincidences. But if it is artificial, it rewrites our entire understanding of human history, proving that the rising seas did not just swallow villages, but entire cities of stone. The debate over Yonaguni hinges on what we can physically touch and measure. But what if the most compelling evidence for these drowned worlds has been echoing in our ears for thousands of years, preserved not in stone but in story? From the ancient Middle East to the remote shores of Australia, cultures separated by vast oceans share a common and haunting memory, a great flood that swallowed the land. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh tells of a world-covering deluge, a story that strikingly parallels the later biblical account of Noah. In the Americas, countless native tribes have traditions of rising waters forcing their ancestors to flee to higher ground. These are not just isolated tales, they form a global chorus of catastrophe. For the indigenous peoples of northern Australia, the story of the Gulf of Cambay flooding is a specific and detailed part of their oral history. They tell of a time when the Gulf was dry land, a rich plain where their ancestors lived and hunted before the ocean rushed in to claim it. Geological surveys confirm this memory with stunning accuracy, showing the Gulf was indeed a vast, fertile basin that was inundated by rising seas roughly 10,000 years ago. The timeline matches perfectly. This is not a vague legend, it is a precise recollection of a real geological event, passed down through over 300 generations. These flood myths provide something that archaeology alone cannot: the human heartbeat behind the disaster. They carry the terror of that relentless rise, the trauma of losing a homeland, and the desperate scramble for survival. They are more than just stories, they are ancestral warnings and historical records, encoded in narrative. They remind us that history is not only written in artifacts and ruins, it is also preserved in the collective memory of humanity. If we listen closely to these ancient echoes, they might just guide us to the very shores where our ancestors watched their world vanish, pointing the way to the cities that sleep beneath the waves. The challenge now is to bridge the gap between these two forms of evidence, to connect the poetry of memory with the hard facts lying on the seabed. The story of a sunken city is not only found in legend or ambiguous stone. In the waters off the western coast of India, myth and seabed converge with startling clarity. This is the site of ancient Dwarka, a city celebrated in sacred Hindu texts as the magnificent, golden capital of the deity Krishna. The scriptures describe it as a fortress of immense wealth and splendor, a port city protected by massive walls, until the day Krishna departed the earth and the entire metropolis was consumed by the sea. For centuries, this was considered a powerful allegory, a divine story with no basis in physical reality. Then marine archaeologists began to dive. What they found on the seafloor was not a random geological formation, but a sprawling complex of man-made structures. They uncovered large, rectangular stone blocks, some weighing many tons, arranged in clear foundations and walls. They recovered ancient anchors, suggesting a bustling harbor, and piles of pottery shards dating back thousands of years. These are not the vague traces of a temporary camp. They are the remains of a significant, prosperous, and organized coastal settlement, one that clearly engaged in maritime trade. The dating of these ruins is a subject of intense discussion, with some artifacts pointing to a history stretching back 3,000 to 4,000 years, while local legends suggest an even more ancient origin. Regardless of the precise century, the evidence paints a consistent picture. A major port city once thrived here on land that is now underwater. Its fate was likely sealed by the same global process we have seen elsewhere, the relentless rise in sea level following the Ice Age, which would have slowly inundated the low-lying city, forcing its abandonment. The discovery of Dwarka's ruins is a monumental moment. It demonstrates that our oldest stories are not mere fiction. They are often fragmented, poetic memories of real events passed down across hundreds of generations. The legend of a great city sinking beneath the waves was a guidebook waiting for the right technology to reveal its truth. This bridge between epic poetry and hard evidence forces a thrilling reconsideration of every other flood myth around the world. If the story of Dwarka led us to a real sunken city, which of the other ancient tales might do the very same? The fate of cities like Dwarka was sealed by a global engine of change, a climatic transformation that rewrote the world's coastlines. When the last ice age ended, global temperatures climbed and the colossal ice sheets began to wither away. This was not a slow, gentle thaw. It was a dramatic release of pent-up water, causing the global ocean to rise by over 120 meters. Think of that number not as a statistic, but as a wall of water taller than a 40-story building, slowly but relentlessly advancing across the continental shelves. This was not a steady, predictable creep. The melt occurred in violent bursts known as meltwater pulses. During these periods, the sea level could jump by several meters in a single century. For the people living on those low-lying plains, this was a disaster in slow motion. One generation might notice the shoreline creeping closer to their village. The next might be forced to abandon their homes entirely as saltwater poisoned their freshwater springs and flooded their fields. A community's entire existence, built over centuries, could be erased in just a few lifetimes. This was not a local event. It was a global crisis that unfolded from the North Sea to the shores of Southeast Asia, displacing entire populations and severing ancient connections between lands. The response to this catastrophe was a desperate mass migration inland. People were pushed into new territories, often already occupied by other groups. This created immense pressure, triggering conflicts over dwindling resources, but also fostering unprecedented cultural exchanges and innovations as different societies were forced to interact and adapt. Some communities may have fragmented and collapsed under the strain, their traditions and identities dissolving. Others may have been forged into something new and resilient, their survival sparking technological revolutions. This ancient drama holds a stark mirror to our own time. The coastal cities of today, with their billions of inhabitants, are built on the very lands that were submerged thousands of years ago. They are just as vulnerable to the power of a changing climate and rising seas. The story of our distant ancestors is a profound reminder that environmental shifts are not abstract concepts. They are forces powerful enough to drown worlds and redirect the entire course of human history, leaving us to wonder what fragments of our own civilization might one day lie silent beneath the waves. One of the most provocative ideas in modern archaeology centers on the Black Sea. This theory paints a picture of the basin not as a sea, but as a vast freshwater lake during the last ice age, its shores sprawling far beyond today's coastline. These exposed plains would have been a paradise for some of the world's earliest farmers, a fertile crescent hidden from our modern maps. Then, around 5,600 years before the Common Era, a dramatic breach occurred. The rising global ocean, fed by melting glaciers, finally pushed the Mediterranean Sea over the natural sill at the Bosporus Strait. What began as a trickle soon became a cataclysm. Scientists calculate that a torrent of water 200 times more powerful than Niagara Falls would have thundered into the basin below. The lake's level would have risen relentlessly, sometimes as fast as 15 centimeters per day, drowning over 150,000 square kilometers of land in a single human lifetime. For the communities living on those shores, this was a real-time apocalypse. Their farms, their villages, their entire world was swallowed by an inexorable saltwater flood. The trauma of such a displacement would have been seared into the collective memory of the survivors, echoing for generations. Could an event of this magnitude be the forgotten seed for the great flood myths found in nearby cultures, including the story of Noah's Ark recorded in the ancient Near East? The scientific community remains divided. Critics point to alternative models suggesting a more gradual, less dramatic filling. Yet, core samples drilled from the seabed itself hold tantalizing clues. They reveal a sudden switch in sediment types and the fossils of freshwater mollusks abruptly replaced by saltwater species. Sonar maps even show the ghostly, drowned river channels of the ancient coastline, now lying deep beneath the saltwater. While the debate over the flood's speed and scale continues, the evidence strongly suggests a significant and transformative event. This means the floor of the Black Sea may not be a barren wasteland, but a preserved time capsule. It could hold the remains of settlements from a pivotal moment in human history when farming communities were forced to flee, potentially scattering their knowledge and technologies across Europe and Asia. The question is no longer if the Black Sea was a fertile refuge for early civilization, but what ruins of that lost world still rest in the deep, silent dark. While the debate over the Black Sea rages, a quieter discovery off the coast of England offers undeniable proof of a lost world's sophistication. Bouldnor Cliff near the Isle of Wight is not a city of stone but a submerged time capsule. Here, beneath 11 meters of water, lies an entire 8,000-year-old landscape, perfectly preserved in a deep layer of peat and silt. This waterlogged environment acts as a natural refrigerator, protecting organic materials that would have rotted away on dry land. Archaeologists diving into this murky silence have not just found scattered stone tools, they have recovered something far more intimate, a piece of carefully twisted fiber, the earliest known piece of string in Britain. This simple cord is a technological marvel. It tells us these people were not just surviving, they were innovating, creating the very technology needed for fishing nets, animal traps, and secure shelters. But the real shock came from a soil sample. Scientists analyzing the ancient peat extracted DNA from wheat. This was not a wild grass, but a domesticated species, and its presence here predates the known arrival of farming in Britain by 2,000 years. This single piece of genetic evidence shatters the old timeline. It suggests that the inhabitants of this sunken world, connected to the vast plains of Doggerland, were not simple hunter-gatherers waiting for civilization to arrive. They were likely in contact with distant farming communities, trading goods and ideas across the water. They may have been experimenting with cultivation long before we ever imagined. The worked wood, the advanced cordage, and the foreign wheat paint a portrait of a dynamic, connected, and highly inventive society. Bouldnor Cliff is a fragile window, a chance to see the everyday life of a people whose world has vanished. It proves that the most profound clues to our past are not always grand monuments. Sometimes they are a piece of string and a speck of pollen, waiting in the cold, dark mud to tell us how much we have yet to learn about the true dawn of human ingenuity. The silent, drowned landscapes we are exploring are not just tombs for lost cities. They are potential vaults for forgotten technologies. Our understanding of ancient innovation has been fundamentally skewed because we have been searching for clues exclusively on dry land, ignoring the very places where the most advanced coastal societies would have flourished. A powerful reminder of what we might be missing comes from a discovery made on land, the Antikythera mechanism. Recovered from a Roman shipwreck, this intricate bronze device of gears and dials, often called the world's first analog computer, was used to predict astronomical events. It proves that the ancient Greeks possessed a level of mechanical engineering sophistication that historians did not believe was possible for another 1,000 years. If such a complex device could be lost from the historical record for so long, what other revolutionary inventions from even earlier coastal civilizations now lie submerged? The clues we are already finding underwater point in this direction. At submerged sites, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of elaborate fish weirs, sophisticated traps built from wood and stone that required a deep understanding of hydrology and marine biology to construct and maintain. These are not simple barriers, they are evidence of large-scale, organized resource management. The very existence of the seafaring cultures that crossed oceans implies an advanced knowledge of boat building, a form of nautical engineering that has left little trace because their most developed shipyards would have been in coastal settlements now underwater. As our underwater exploration technology improves, we may one day dredge up evidence of early metallurgy from these sunken zones, or find stone observatories aligned to stars from a time when the shoreline was miles away. This search fundamentally challenges the linear story of human progress, the tidy idea that technology moved in a simple, upward line from primitive to modern. It suggests instead a history of fits and starts, where brilliant innovations could be developed in one era, only to be lost to a rising tide and forgotten for millennia, waiting for us to find them again on the seafloor. The waters of the Gulf of Cambay hold a discovery so staggering it threatens to rewrite history itself. During a routine sonar survey off India's west coast, researchers were stunned to see the seabed light up with massive geometric shapes. The images revealed what appeared to be the foundations of a vast, sunken city, with clear, rectilinear structures stretching for kilometers across the ocean floor. Even more astonishing were the artifacts dredged up from the site, pieces of worked wood, weathered pottery, and stone tools that bore the unmistakable marks of human hands. Initial dating of these materials suggested an age of around 9,000 years, a figure that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. If this dating is correct, it would mean a sophisticated, urban society was flourishing in India thousands of years before the great civilizations of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley ever arose. This would not just add a new chapter to our history books, it would demand an entirely new volume. The implications are profound, pointing to a lost cradle of civilization that developed in coastal lowlands only to be completely erased by the rising seas. Yet, this incredible claim is locked in a fierce scientific debate. Skeptics argue that the powerful tidal currents in the Gulf are perfectly capable of scouring the seabed and accumulating natural debris, shaping rocks and moving wood in ways that can mimic human construction. They question whether the recovered materials were found in their original context or were simply swept together by the ocean over millennia. For every researcher who sees the precise angles of a city wall, another sees the natural fracturing of sandstone. This is the razor's edge of underwater exploration, where the line between a world-altering discovery and a geological mirage is incredibly thin. The Gulf of Cambay stands as a powerful symbol of both the immense promise and the profound challenges of this field. It dares us to believe in a deeper human past, while demanding a level of proof that the unforgiving ocean is often reluctant to provide. The ultimate verdict still lies buried in the silt, waiting for the one piece of evidence that will silence all doubt and finally bring this 9,000-year-old metropolis back into the light of history. Finding these drowned worlds demands more than just a diver and a dream. The search for Ice Age cities relies on technology that can see through the murk and reach into the deep. Side-scan sonar is the workhorse of this exploration, a device towed behind a research vessel that paints a detailed acoustic picture of the seabed. It reveals the ghostly outlines of ancient river channels, submerged hills, and any unnatural geometric shapes that might hint at human construction. But to peer beneath the sand and silt, scientists use a sub-bottom profiler. This tool acts like an underwater ultrasound, sending sound waves into the seabed to map the layers of sediment below. It can detect the foundations of structures buried for millennia or the hollow spaces of a collapsed dwelling, all without disturbing a single grain of sand. Once a promising target is identified, the delicate work begins. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, become the archaeologists' eyes and hands. These uncrewed submarines, connected to the surface by a cable, can hover over a site with precision, capturing high-definition video and using robotic arms to carefully recover artifacts from the ooze. This non-invasive approach is crucial, as the very things we seek are often incredibly fragile. A piece of 8,000-year-old string, like the one found at Bouldnor Cliff, would dissolve into dust if handled roughly. The environment itself is a relentless adversary. Underwater sites are often shrouded in near-total darkness, with visibility measured in centimeters. Powerful currents can threaten both divers and equipment, while the cold and pressure strictly limit the time humans can spend on the bottom. Yet, these same hostile conditions can create perfect preservation. In deep, oxygen-poor water, an anaerobic environment forms. Without oxygen, the bacteria and fungi that normally decay wood, leather, and textiles cannot survive. A wooden tool or a woven basket that would have rotted away on land in a few years can lie on the seabed for thousands of years, perfectly preserved in a kind of watery time capsule. The greatest challenge, however, might be one of scale. The continental shelves that were once dry land encompass millions of square kilometers. Surveying such a vast area, inch by inch, is a monumental task hampered by limited funding and the sheer logistical complexity of working at sea. A single storm can delay a mission for weeks, burning through a tight budget, but the tide is turning. New advancements in artificial intelligence are now being trained to analyze sonar data, quickly flagging potential human-made patterns in the endless noise of the seabed. Autonomous underwater vehicles can map large swaths of ocean floor on their own, freed from the tether of a mothership. Each technological leap brings us closer to the next great discovery. With every improvement in our tools, the silent, sunken plains of our lost world become a little less silent, offering new hope that we will soon gaze upon the streets and structures of a chapter of humanity we thought was gone forever. The story of Helike begins not in myth but in recorded history. This was a real, prosperous city-state in classical Greece, a prominent member of the Achaean League known for its seafaring and its great sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes. Then, in the winter of 373 BC, the earth revolted. A massive earthquake struck the region, and as the ground shook, the city collapsed. Immediately after, a colossal tsunami generated by the same seismic shock swept in from the Gulf of Corinth to finish the job. The waters swallowed Helike whole, submerging every temple, house, and street. The city and all its inhabitants were gone, literally wiped from the map in a single, terrifying night. For centuries afterward, ancient writers noted that the ruins of Helike could sometimes be glimpsed beneath the water, a haunting reminder of the city's fate, until even those visible traces were buried by silt and forgotten. Helike became a legend, a cautionary tale debated by scholars but lost to physical proof. Its recovery is a masterclass in archaeological detective work. The search was a puzzle that lasted for over 2,000 years. Researchers knew the general area from ancient texts, but the landscape had changed dramatically. The coastline had shifted, and layers of sediment had buried the ruins not under the open sea, but beneath a coastal plain. It was a team combining historians, geologists, and archaeologists who finally pieced it together. They used core drilling, ground-penetrating radar, and a deep understanding of how earthquakes reshape land, and they found it. The lost city was not at the bottom of the Gulf, but entombed several meters underground, preserved in a waterlogged layer of clay and gravel. Excavations revealed its tragic streets, the foundations of buildings, and even the corroded coins from the pockets of its citizens, frozen in the moment of the disaster. Helike's rediscovery is more than just the confirmation of an ancient story. It provides a crucial blueprint for finding other sunken cities, especially those from the much deeper past of the Ice Age. It teaches us that the search must be multidisciplinary, blending written records with cutting-edge geology. It shows that the coastline is a dynamic, shifting border, and that a city swallowed by the sea may not be found in the deep ocean, but hidden under farmland or river deltas, waiting for the right tools and the right questions to reveal its location. If a city from the classical era could vanish so completely and be found again after millennia, what hope does that give us for the truly ancient coastal settlements from 10,000 years ago? The persistence that found Helike is the same determination we must now turn toward the silent, sunken plains of our own lost world. These ancient floods did more than just erase coastlines, they rerouted the very flow of humanity. As the ocean swallowed their homelands, the survivors had no choice but to flee, triggering a chain reaction of migration that reshaped our world. Imagine entire populations, generation after generation, watching the sea creep closer until the day came to gather what they could and move inland into territories already occupied by others. This was not a planned exploration, it was a desperate survival strategy forced upon them by a changing planet. The genetic story locked within our DNA confirms this epic exodus. Scientists tracing the lineage of modern populations can see clear signals of these ancient journeys. The people displaced from the drowning plains of Sundaland, for instance, carried their seafaring skills with them, pushing out across the vast Pacific in one of history's most incredible voyages of colonization. Their DNA is woven into the people of islands from the Philippines to Polynesia, a living record of a homeland lost beneath the waves. Similarly, the retreat from the flooded plains of Doggerland and the North Sea sent waves of people into the European interior. These newcomers brought with them not just their genes, but new ideas, technologies, and social structures. This massive mixing of previously separated populations created a crucible for innovation. Conflict was inevitable as groups competed for land, but so was collaboration and cultural exchange. The pressure to adapt in new environments with new neighbors likely accelerated the development of new tools, new forms of social organization, and new ways of seeing the world. The disappearance of one center of human life did not simply mean extinction, it often meant a painful rebirth elsewhere. The loss of a single, concentrated homeland forced a diaspora that spread people and their unique knowledge across the globe. This genetic and technological remixing became a powerful engine for human diversification. It is a profound paradox that a global disaster could simultaneously destroy so much and yet catalyze so much new growth. The story written in our genes tells us that our ancestry is not a simple tree with isolated branches, but a complex flowing river shaped by ancient environmental crises. It asks us to consider a humbling thought. The very diversity of human culture and ingenuity we see today may be, in part, the unexpected legacy of those first coastal civilizations who watched their world vanish forever. Deep within the jungles of Mexico, a different kind of water grave holds its secrets tight. The Yucatan Peninsula is a limestone sponge, riddled with a vast network of caves and sinkholes known as cenotes. Today, these are flooded with crystal-clear freshwater, but for much of human history they were dry, subterranean caverns. During the last ice age, these caves provided essential shelter from the harsh surface environment, and most importantly, access to vital water sources deep underground. Paleo-Indians, the first people to reach this continent, ventured into these dark labyrinths, leaving traces of their passage in the profound silence. Then the world warmed. As the great ice sheets melted, the rising seas did more than just advance coastlines. They pushed the global water table upward from below. Groundwater slowly, inevitably, began to fill these caves, turning them into the beautiful but treacherous flooded cenotes we see today. This was not a violent flooding, but a gentle, inexorable rise that sealed these underground spaces like a tomb, creating one of the most perfect preservation environments on Earth. The anaerobic, cool, and dark waters halted decay in its tracks. Within these submerged time capsules, divers have made discoveries that rewrite the story of the Americas. The most famous is Naya, the nearly complete skeleton of a teenage girl who fell to her death in a cave over 12,000 years ago. Her bones, resting undisturbed for millennia, provide an unprecedented genetic snapshot of the earliest Americans. But she is not alone. The caves have yielded other human remains, stone tools, and even evidence of ancient rituals, with artifacts placed deliberately in the darkness as offerings. This is the fascinating paradox of the Yucatan caves. While rising seas drowned coastal cities, here the same global process of melting ice preserved an entire subterranean world. The water did not smash and scatter, it encased and protected. Every artifact, every bone lies exactly where it was left, offering archaeologists a pristine window into a moment frozen in time. These flooded caverns prove that the legacy of the Ice Age is not only one of loss, but also of perfect preservation, waiting in the dark water for us to finally shine a light. The idea of a sophisticated Ice Age civilization is one of history's most tantalizing possibilities. Some researchers point to a collection of puzzling anomalies that seem to defy our standard timelines. They argue that the survivors of a great coastal civilization, forced to migrate inland by rising seas, carried their advanced knowledge with them, seeding new cultures with fragments of a lost world. This would explain why ancient sites like the Great Pyramid of Giza or the massive stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey display such staggering feats of engineering and precise astronomical alignment. How did these early builders achieve such perfection with what we assume were simple tools? The theory suggests they were not starting from scratch, but working from a legacy of inherited knowledge, a blueprint passed down from a much older, maritime society that had already mapped the stars and mastered stone. These ideas are fueled by the uncanny similarities in myths and symbols found in cultures separated by vast oceans. Stories of world-ending floods, of gods who came from the sea, and of a lost golden age appear in the folklore of the Americas, Asia, and the Middle East. Could these be the scattered, poetic memories of a common ancestral catastrophe, the drowning of their original homeland? Mainstream archaeology rightly demands hard proof, noting that these patterns could also be explained by the universal human experience of living near water and observing the heavens. The grand civilization described by theorists would have left behind more than just enigmatic legends. It would have left cities. Yet this is the very heart of the problem. Its most likely centers now lie under 120 meters of ocean, on continental shelves we have only begun to map in detail. The debate itself pushes exploration forward, driving us to look deeper and question harder. It forces us to wonder if the story of human progress is not a slow, steady climb, but a series of peaks and valleys, with entire chapters of achievement submerged beneath the waves, waiting to change our understanding of who we are and where we come from. Off the coast of modern Israel, the sea guards a time capsule from a much earlier world. The Neolithic village of Atlit rests on the seabed, a complete community frozen in time since approximately 7,000 years before the Common Era. This is not a collection of scattered artifacts, but the ghostly footprint of a functioning village preserved with stunning clarity. The foundations of stone houses still outline the spaces where families lived. A freshwater well carved deep into the stone stands silent at the center of the settlement, a testament to their engineering and their reliance on a resource that would ultimately betray them. Perhaps most haunting are the human burials where skeletons rest in their original graves, carrying within them a silent record of their lives. Analysis of these bones revealed the earliest known case of tuberculosis in a human, a glimpse into the health challenges of a community living in close quarters. The people of Atlit were not simple foragers. They were a sophisticated society of fishermen and farmers, with stone monuments suggesting a rich spiritual life and a complex social structure. They had mastered their environment, building a stable life at the water's edge. Yet their world was changing. The inexorable rise of the Mediterranean Sea, fed by distant melting glaciers, began to push salt water into their freshwater aquifer, poisoning their well and flooding their fields. The decision to abandon their home was not made in a day, but over generations as the sea slowly reclaimed what they had built. Atlit offers us something rare, a clear and intimate portrait of a real community facing a slow-motion catastrophe. We see their homes, their tools, their diseases, and their dead. We witness their adaptation and ultimately their forced displacement. This single village lying in the shallow waters of the Levant is a microcosm of a global drama. It provides invaluable, heartbreaking insight into the daily lives of our ancestors and the profound challenges they overcame or succumbed to in a world transforming around them. The silent contours of the seabed are an open book for those who know how to read it. Geologists do not search for lost cities directly. They first search for lost landscapes, reconstructing the very ground our ancestors would have chosen to call home. They achieve this through a powerful suite of tools that listen to the Earth's hidden layers. Core sampling is like taking a biopsy of the ocean floor, plunging a long tube deep into the sediment to extract a vertical timeline of history. Within these muddy cylinders, scientists find ancient pollen grains from long-drowned forests, the shells of freshwater mollusks that once lived in inland lakes, and even layers of peat from vanished marshes. Each sample is a tiny time capsule, revealing what kind of environment existed there when it was dry land. To see the bigger picture, they use seismic reflection. This technology works like a sophisticated echo sounder, sending powerful acoustic pulses deep into the seabed. The reflected sound waves paint a detailed, three-dimensional image of the geological structures buried below, revealing the ghostly channels of ancient river systems, the basins of filled-in lakes, and the distinct lines of past shorelines, all now entombed under hundreds of feet of water and sand. These features are then charted onto bathymetric maps, creating topographic maps of the drowned world. The true power, however, comes from correlation. When a geological map shows a wide, fertile river valley converging on a sheltered coastal plain, it immediately flags that location as a prime spot for human habitation. If archaeologists then find characteristic stone tools or butchered animal bones in nearby coastal caves dating to the same period, the evidence converges. That specific submerged river valley becomes a high-priority target for underwater exploration. This interdisciplinary approach transforms abstract geology into a practical treasure map. It shifts the search from blindly scouring millions of square kilometers of ocean to intelligently investigating specific, promising locations where the land itself invited settlement. The stones and sediments tell us where to look, guiding our robotic submarines toward the places where human stories are most likely to be waiting, buried in the deep. Another lost world lies beneath the warm, shallow waters of the Persian Gulf. During the last ice age, this entire basin was not a sea, but a vast, fertile river valley, an oasis of life in a harsh world. Known to scientists as the Gulf Oasis, this region was a paradise carved by the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which flowed through it to reach the ocean far to the south. It was a lush, green landscape of freshwater lakes, marshes, and rolling plains, a perfect refuge for both animals and humans. This wasn't a marginal territory, it was a core region, a potential heartland for some of humanity's earliest experiments. The archaeological record from the lands surrounding the modern Gulf is bursting with clues. We find evidence of some of the world's earliest seafaring, the domestication of animals like the gazelle, and sophisticated trade networks that moved precious stones and tools across vast distances. These discoveries on the current coastline are like finding pieces of a puzzle along the edges, hinting that the true center of the action, the original source of this cultural flourishing, now lies underwater. The flooding of this oasis was a slow, relentless process, culminating around 6,000 years before the Common Era. As the rising Indian Ocean finally pushed over the Strait of Hormuz, it transformed the verdant valley into the marine basin we see today, submerging an area larger than the entire United Kingdom. Any settlements that existed in that low-lying basin would have been gradually abandoned as the saltwater crept inland, poisoning freshwater sources and drowning the very ecosystems that sustained life. The search for these sunken sites is immensely challenging. The sediments of the Gulf are thick, and the political complexities of the region make large-scale underwater surveys difficult. Yet, the geological and climatic models are overwhelmingly persuasive. They show a landscape that was not only habitable, but was arguably one of the most desirable places on Earth to live at the time. This makes the Persian Gulf one of the most promising and profound frontiers in the search for lost Ice Age civilizations. It stands as a silent, submerged question mark, holding the potential to reveal an entire chapter of human prehistory that could explain the sudden explosion of cultural complexity we see on its surrounding shores. The story of our past may be waiting not in the deep ocean, but under the deceptively calm waters of one of the world's most strategic waterways. This deep-seated trauma echoes across the globe in the stories we still tell. The memory of rising waters is carved into the foundational texts of nearly every major culture, from the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical story of Noah's Ark. These are not just isolated tales of punishment or divine whimsy. They are powerful cultural memories, a collective processing of a real and recurring nightmare that plagued our ancestors for generations. These myths served a crucial purpose, providing a framework for understanding a world that could, without warning, swallow everything they had built. They transformed an incomprehensible geological process into a narrative with cause and effect, often embedding moral lessons about human behavior and the power of the gods or nature. The story of a great flood becomes a way to explain why the world is the way it is, and a warning to future generations about the fragility of human endeavor. By placing these ancient narratives side by side with the geological record of post-Ice Age sea level rise, a startling pattern emerges. The timelines often align with stunning accuracy. The indigenous Australian stories of the Gulf of Carpenteria's flooding, for example, describe coastlines that match the submerged maps from 10,000 years ago. This correlation suggests that these myths are more than fiction. They are a form of oral history, preserving the contours of a lost world across hundreds of generations. This shared cultural trauma fundamentally shaped the development of spirituality and society. The recurring theme of a catastrophic flood, survived by a chosen few, reinforces ideas of renewal, judgment, and the need for cultural preservation. It influenced how communities viewed their relationship with the powerful, unpredictable forces of nature, often personifying them as vengeful or capricious deities who demanded respect and sacrifice. The very concept of a lost golden age, a sunken paradise like Atlantis, can be seen as a longing for those fertile, drowned homelands. These stories bind us together, revealing a common human experience of loss and resilience that transcends geography. They are the emotional and psychological legacy of the rising seas, proof that the most profound cataclysms are not just measured in meters of water, but in the stories we tell to make sense of our place in a world that is always changing. The cold, dark waters of the Baltic Sea guard a secret of a different kind of lost world. This entire basin was once a vast freshwater lake, known to scientists as Ancillus Lake, completely cut off from the world's oceans and surrounded by dense European forests. For the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who lived along its shores, this was a land of plenty, offering rich fishing and abundant game. Their lives were intimately tied to this immense body of water, and they built their settlements right at its edge. Then the world changed. The land bridge separating the lake from the North Sea finally gave way, and saltwater poured in. The lake transformed into the brackish Baltic Sea we know today, and its water level began to rise, steadily consuming the very shorelines where ancient people had made their homes. While this process drowned their world, it also created one of the most remarkable preservation environments on the planet. The Baltic Sea is naturally low in oxygen, a condition that starves the bacteria and wood-boring organisms that normally cause organic materials to rot. This unique chemistry has turned the seabed into a time capsule of incredible fidelity. Recent underwater surveys have yielded finds that seem almost miraculous. Archaeologists have brought up intricately carved wooden paddles, their handles shaped by hands thousands of years ago. They have found the remains of complex fishing weirs, elaborate traps built from woven branches that demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of local fish migration. Most astonishingly, they have mapped the outlines of entire settlements, with wooden stakes and post holes still standing in the seabed, marking the ghostly footprints of houses and communal structures. These are not just scattered stones, they are the tangible remnants of daily life, preserved with a clarity that is almost unheard of on dry land. The story of the Baltic is a powerful paradox. The same rising waters that submerged these coastal sites and forced their inhabitants to flee are the very reason we can now study their world in such intimate detail. The water that destroyed also protected, encasing their tools and homes in a cold, dark embrace. It shows us that the end of one world can, through a strange twist of fate, become the beginning of our understanding, offering a window into the lives of Northern Europe's first settlers that we never thought possible. The tools to read this drowned history are advancing at a breathtaking pace. Autonomous underwater vehicles now glide silently through the deep, mapping vast expanses of the continental shelf with a detail once thought impossible. These robotic explorers, freed from the limitations of a human crew, can spend weeks scanning the seabed, creating three-dimensional portraits of the submerged landscape. Their high-resolution sonar does not just show the shape of the seafloor, it reveals the subtle textures and anomalies that might be the footprint of a forgotten settlement. On the surface, another revolution is taking place in the laboratory. Scientists are now analyzing the very sediments of the seafloor, sifting through ancient mud not for artifacts but for invisible clues. They can extract trace DNA from the environment, genetic fragments left behind by the plants, animals, and even the humans who once lived there. This environmental DNA acts as a ghostly fingerprint, confirming a human presence in places where no stone tool has ever been found. Yet this race against time is intensifying. The very waters that have preserved these sites for millennia are becoming more hostile. Climate change and coastal development pose a direct threat. Industrial trawling scrapes the seabed clean, pipeline routes are laid through potential archaeological zones, and pollution degrades the delicate organic materials we seek. There is a growing urgency to find and document these lost chapters before they are erased for a second time, this time by our own hands. The future of this search depends on a global effort. International collaborations are pooling resources and expertise, aiming for systematic surveys of the world's continental shelves. This is not a task for a single nation, but a shared human endeavor to recover our collective past. With increased funding and focus, the next decade could bring discoveries that fundamentally reshape our story. We stand on the brink of finding not just isolated villages, but the true metropolises of the Ice Age, finally revealing the sophistication and scale of civilizations that thrived when the world's coastlines were a distant memory. But this incredible search for our past is shadowed by a difficult question: who truly owns these sunken worlds? As we develop the technology to reach these sites, we must also develop the wisdom to handle them with care. These are not just archaeological sites, they are the ancestral homelands of people whose descendants may still live nearby. For many indigenous communities, these drowned landscapes are not lost. They are simply waiting, holding the bones of their forebears and the sacred grounds of their cultural memory. Their oral histories have spoken of these places for millennia. To excavate without their involvement is not just ethically wrong, it risks severing a living connection to the past and ignoring a vital perspective that could guide our entire understanding of what we find. This is not merely a scientific endeavor, it is a deeply human one that demands collaboration and respect. Alongside this ethical imperative is a race against physical destruction. The same ocean that has preserved these sites for thousands of years is now a chaotic frontier. Industrial fishing trawlers drag heavy nets across the seabed, scraping away fragile artifacts and leveling ancient settlements in an instant. Undersea cables, oil and gas pipelines, and deep-sea mining operations can plow straight through a prehistoric village without ever knowing it was there. And then there are the looters, treasure hunters who see a sunken city not as a chapter of human history, but as a trove of valuable artifacts to be sold on the black market, scattering priceless context to the winds. Protecting these fragile time capsules requires a global commitment. We need strong international agreements that designate sensitive areas as protected underwater cultural heritage, similar to a UNESCO World Heritage Site but on the seabed. Research must be conducted with meticulous care, prioritizing non-invasive surveys and only excavating when absolutely necessary. Most importantly, we must raise public awareness about the significance of these lost worlds, not as a source of treasure, but as the irreplaceable roots of our shared human story. The goal is a delicate balance to satisfy our thirst for knowledge while honoring the cultural legacy of these places and ensuring they survive for future generations to study with even better tools and greater understanding. The silent cities beneath the waves have waited for 10,000 years. Our responsibility is to ensure they are not lost a second time, just as we are finally learning how to listen. A stone tool found in a coastal cave is only half the story. Its true meaning might lie in the sunken village that once produced it, a settlement now resting on the seabed just offshore. This is the fundamental challenge and the incredible opportunity of modern archaeology, a field that is finally learning to merge the evidence from dry land with the secrets of the drowned continental shelves. These two worlds were never separate in the ancient past, and to understand the people who lived there, we cannot study them in isolation. An integrated approach is the only way to reconstruct a complete cultural landscape. Think of a trading network. On land, archaeologists might excavate a settlement and find beautiful seashells used as ornaments or currency. For decades, the assumption was that these shells were gathered from nearby beaches. But when marine surveys map the now submerged plains in front of that same settlement, they often discover the original, dense shellfish beds that were the true source, located miles out from today's coast. This simple connection transforms our understanding. It reveals the true economic reach of that community and paints a picture of a territory that stretched far out into what is now open water. The settlements we find on our present-day coasts were likely just the hinterlands, the upland extensions of much larger and more populous communities built on the fertile, low-lying plains. By correlating the types of tools, pottery, and art styles found in both the coastal caves and on the submerged seabed, researchers can start to map the true extent of a single culture's territory. It allows them to see the connections between a hilltop ceremonial site and the fishing village that supplied it, even though that village has been under 100 meters of water for 10,000 years. This method turns scattered clues into a coherent narrative, revealing ancient roadways, trade routes, and social networks that are completely invisible if we only look at the current coastline. This holistic view does more than just fill in a map. It fundamentally changes our perception of these societies. It shows they were not landlocked or confined, but masters of a much broader environment, adept at exploiting both terrestrial and marine resources in a complex, integrated economy. Their world was not defined by the shore, but encompassed it, blending the forest, the plain, and the sea into a single, sustainable homeland. Every artifact pulled from the waves adds a new piece to the puzzle, forcing us to rethink the ruins on land not as isolated villages, but as the scattered fragments of a much grander, interconnected world, most of which we have yet to find. Our journey into the deep has revealed a world remade by water, a hidden chapter of human ambition and adaptation. These vanished Ice Age cities were not primitive outposts, but the vibrant centers of their time, built by sophisticated mariners, traders, and farmers on fertile plains we now call the continental shelf. From the heartland of Doggerland to the tropical expanse of Sundaland, their stories force us to rewrite our own. We can no longer view the dawn of civilization as a slow march inland, but as a dynamic story unfolding along coastlines that have long since disappeared beneath the waves. This lost world challenges our most basic assumptions about human progress, suggesting that ingenuity and complex society flourished in environments we have only just begun to explore. The relentless rise of the sea at the end of the last ice age was a global crisis that reshaped humanity, forcing mass migrations, fostering new technologies, and severing ancient connections. It is a powerful reminder that climate change is not a future threat, but a force that has already dictated the course of our history, drowning entire worlds and redirecting the flow of human destiny. Today, as our technology finally catches up to the scale of this mystery, we stand at the edge of a new era of discovery. Each advance in sonar mapping, each dive by a robotic submarine, brings us closer to gazing upon the streets and structures of a people we thought were lost forever. The past is not entirely gone. It is waiting in the silent dark, holding secrets that could fundamentally alter our understanding of who we are and where we come from. These stories from the deep invite us to reflect on our own place in a world of rising seas. What fragments of our own civilization might one day lie silent for future explorers to ponder? We would love to hear which of these lost worlds captured your imagination the most. Was it the tragic fate of Doggerland, the creeping flood of Sundaland, or the mysterious stones of Yonaguni? Share your thoughts in the comments below.